Now, special presidential envoy for hostage affairs, Adam Boehler, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start here with a report. A reporter out of Channel 12 in Israel, citing an Israeli source, says that U.S.-Hamas talks over hostages, quote, have failed. Fact or fiction? Where can you give us an update this morning?
I actually think they were very productive talks. They identified some opportunity to come together because we're always asking, Israel, Hamas, how's it going to win? What does it look afterward? And I think they provided some very interesting views there in the discussions.
Interesting views that can lead you to a release or an impasse?
Yeah, I mean, really my goal is to release prisoners. I focused on our alive American, Adi Alexander, and our 4 dead Americans, getting them home as soon as possible, and how important that was to President Trump. But we also discussed what the end might look like. And I will tell you that Hamas did orient toward a long-term truce, as they called it, a truce where they would be disarmed, a truce where they would not be part of the political policy, and a truce where we would ensure that they are in a place where they can't hurt Israel. Part of that was rebuilding Gaza, but the discussions revolved around a few things that I think might actually end up being some of what you see post Steve Witkoff.
How difficult is it to sit down with the leaders of an organization that torture, that murder people? I mean, the most recent example that has grabbed hearts and minds are the children, the Bibas children, 4 years old, 9 months old. Do you worry that having direct conversations with them gives this group any kind of veneer of respectability or legitimacy on the world stage?
First and foremost, it is hard. I listen to the families' stories. I hug the families when we bring them home, which is unbelievable. And I know exactly what happened. So you walk into there and you kind of have to block it out emotionally, because I'm under no auspices. As much as someone might smile or give me a coffee as we talk, that doesn't mean that they didn't do what they do. My belief then is dialogue is very important. I think I follow the President of the United States. Everybody said he couldn't go to North Korea. He sits with North Korea. You have real discussions. Dialogue does not mean giving things. Dialogue doesn't mean giving millions or billions of dollars like the prior administration did. Dialogue means sitting, hearing what someone wants, and then identifying, does it fit with what we want or not? And then how can you get somewhere in the middle and not have a war? And I think those kind of dialogues are very important to the president because, as he constantly says, he doesn't want war. War is a last resort. He wants a peaceful world. And so what I'm trying to do is say, one, how can I get our hostages out as soon as possible? I feel every single day when they're not out. And then how do you create the circumstances to stop this war?
So obviously there's a lot of widespread reporting that Israel did not like this idea of the U.S. having direct talks with Hamas, that they in fact found out once it was already underway or it had happened. You got a call from Ron Dermer, the head of their strategic affairs. It was described as a very heated phone call. Only you can tell us what actually happened on that call. Why did the U.S. move ahead with these direct talks knowing Israel had objections? And where would you say the relationship is now post the Dermer phone call?
I would say that the Israelis were kept informed. I did have a discussion with Ron. Ron raised some concerns, and quite frankly, it's totally fair for Israel to have concerns if we're having direct contacts with Hamas. For all he knows, he doesn't know me. Maybe I would meet them and say, they seem like such nice guys. You know, let's have beer and chips with them. So I think there was concern. I think I was able to put him at ease, that I wasn't going to go off the rails, that it would be parameters that we would work on together. So I thought that stuff was natural, and there's no question in my mind that our greatest ally is Israel.
So Times of Israel says one of Israel's opposition points to the direct talks was its concern that the U.S. might lose interest in securing a broad hostage ceasefire deal once all American hostages are released. Can you speak to that concern? Is that something you discussed with Mr. Dermer?
Of course. Well, let me tell you something. Not that, but I discussed that with the president. And the president has been very clear that is all hostages. And so I will say, when you think about my job is to get all hostages home there, because the job was given to me by the president and take my orders from the president of the United States. And so he's been very clear. And if you think about the American that was there and the bodies that are there, that was a pretense to bring everybody home. It wasn't a one-off where then United States, we care way too much about the region. If you see the survivors that went and saw the president in the Oval Office, that was a group of Americans, but a group of full Israelis. So we have made that commitment. Israel is a strong ally. If someone wants to take hostages to Israel, we feel it too.
So the president put up a stark warning on social media with regard to Hamas and getting the hostages out. He said, turn them over or it's immediately over for you. He says a beautiful future awaits. But if you don't turn over the hostages, you are dead. Release the hostages now or there will be hell to pay later. What's the deadline and what's the hell to pay?
He didn't set a deadline, but let me just look at when he's done it before. I remember actually a week ago, I was in Baghdad. And there's a little mark of the spot right where al-Soleimani's car with an Iraqi in it, right where it was hit by 2 missiles. And there's a spot. We all got out to look at it. And I remember the day he did it. I actually happened to be the West Wing, but it was surprising. No one else would do it because they were afraid. And this is what I will say. It may seem like he makes empty threats until he carries out the threat. And then it's not so empty, and then you're dead. And so I think in these situations, and he's done the same thing with Iran, they are walking a line on Iran because it's not so hard for us to partner with Israel and take out that nuclear capability, which probably should do.
Well, several examples, as you note, the president's action come to mind. Adam Boehler, thank you for your time. Just know the prayers of folks around the world are.
Envoy Adam Boehler is defending his move to hold direct talks with the Hamas terror group. He sits down with our I-24 news correspondent Amichai Stein from our Hebrew channel to talk about the status of ongoing ceasefire negotiations with Hamas. Here's more from that interview.
Tell me, some Israeli officials are briefing us that the talks failed. What's your view about the success of these talks?
I think that a conversation and a dialogue is very important. I can't say whether they failed or whether they didn't fail. I'm happy to see folks in Doha this week because I think dialogue is where you get places. It doesn't mean you give things up, but dialogue is where you get places. And so I think they might be hard pressed to say it failed based on that. But honestly, I'm hopeful that I was helpful to them.
Tell me, are you going to continue these meetings right now?
I think it depends quite a bit where things go. I think if things are actually on the right track, I have some hope for where this can go. And I think if it follows the right track, that would be great. I think there could be other meetings, even as it goes on the track, just to make sure that things stay on the right track. I've never found communication and dialogue bad. I found what people can give during that dialogue. And what you'll see is the United States does not give money to people. The United States uses a strong hand when we have people that have our citizens, and that includes allies like Israel. And so we're not going to get pushed around, I can tell you that. But we are going to get our people back.
How was the conversation between you and Minister Dermer? I understand it wasn't easy.
Ron explained to me some of his concern. I said that I understood the concern. I don't live right now in a country that is surrounded by people that want that country not to exist. And so I don't do that. And so for him to get frustrated or concerned when I'm engaging, I think it's totally normal. I hope based on my engagement that he knows me a little bit better and knows that I don't take Israel's existence as nothing. I always believe it's threatened. I love the country. It's a great ally, and I would never do something to hurt it. I hope what he takes is that I need to engage because there's people that I love, that you love, that we worry about every single day.
Tell me, how optimistic are you that a deal can be reached, sir?
I'm optimistic, and I know that sounds odd because it's gone on for a while. But the reason I'm optimistic is because the president of the United States, President Trump, was elected. It changed everything in the region. And I think between that and all of the unbelievable work that Netanyahu And Israel is done in destroying Hezbollah, in weakening Syria, in what they've done in Iran. All of these things have created a different Middle East than we had before. And so I think there's an answer here. And I think the answer is that Hamas lays down their arms, we exchange prisoners, and they go into a long-term truce where they don't fight. They're not part of any political party. And that gives us lots of cooling off time, because there's a lot of families that are very angry at each other, on both sides in that case. And then we think about rebuilding Gaza. We've got to. We can't just have rubble. And so I think all those things can happen. And I think Hamas at this point is somewhat realistic about what is possible.
Tell me, by the way, was it your initiative for these meetings, or was it Hamas went to try to reach the US?
I reached out to Hamas.
How did the idea came into your mind? Or the president, was it his idea?
I think our view as a team was that it's very, very difficult to really understand another side without sitting in front of them. Again, we discuss it. We don't think meeting somebody is a concession. That's not what a concession is. Giving $1 billion like the prior administration did, more than $1 billion to Iran, that is a concession. And so we don't give concessions in meetings unless we get a lot back. And so our view was very clearly to sit there, listen, understand what things are important to the other side, and then think through where are there commonalities. Oftentimes there are some commonalities, because you need to think exactly what you're saying, Amichai. Until you can see the end and the terms of the end, it's hard to get there. And I'll tell you, I think I see the end.
What is, let's say, the bottom line? What's your message to the Israeli public right now, who is asking himself, what is your important message to them?
My important message to the Israeli public is stay unified right now, the best you can, and encourage. I think it's, in history, you see very strong leaders. And the strongest leaders, the ones that become great, are the ones that move over to achieve a lasting peace. And I think that your prime minister now has the ability to prove that it's not just war, but he's the one that brings peace.
Joining me now is the man who sat across the proverbial table from Hamas, U.S. hostage envoy Adam Boehler. Adam, thanks so much for joining us. Let's start on these direct negotiations with Hamas. First of all, obviously controversial to directly negotiate with terrorists. How much sign-off did you get from President Trump beforehand? And this is just my personal curiosity. As a Jewish American, did you have to steel yourself before sitting down to deal with people who are definitionally anti-Semitic murderers?
Well, I'll say meeting with people, whether they're good people or bad people, is part of my job. I'm the special envoy. I need to go and have dialogue with anybody, and that includes a lot of people that I would classify as not so good people, to help other Americans. And so it comes part and parcel in the job. I knew that I was going to meet Hamas as a result of it, and we discussed it. Then I think when you walk and you sit in front of somebody and you know what they've done, it's hard not to think of it. I wouldn't say it's the most productive. The most productive is to realize that every piece of a person is a human, and to identify with the human elements of those people, and then build from there. But it definitely feels a little odd knowing what they really are.
So thank you for your candor. So you did get sign-off from President Trump ahead of time, though?
Of course.
Yeah. What was the result of the meeting? How close are you to a deal to get the American hostages, living and dead, murdered, still in Gaza, out? How close are you?
Well, first of all, I want to note the American hostages that are there, one in particular that's alive, Adi Alexander, and 4 dead bodies of Americans, with about 50 killed. And that's just not acceptable. We live in the United States, the strongest country in the world, and there are 6,000 Americans in different countries. So one of my views here is we've got to change that completely. With respect to the Hamas situation, I do think there's hope. I think that Israel has done a wonderful, masterful job eliminating Hamas, Hezbollah, a number of other enemies in the state that makes things possible that weren't possible before. And I think you could see something like a long-term truce where we forgive prisoners, where Hamas lays down their arms, where they agree they're not part of the political party going forward. I think that's a reality. It's real close.
Do you have plans to sit down with Hamas again?
You never know. You know, sometimes you're in the area and you drop by.
All right. It's a very unique pop-in, I suppose. So you talked about the job Israel has done in trying to negotiate the release of the hostages, living and dead. Axios' reporter Barak Ravid is reporting the top Israeli official, Ron Dermer, strongly discouraged you from talking directly with Hamas. He said it was a tense phone call. Tell us about that. Do you understand why Netanyahu, Dermer, others might be upset?
I do understand. I spoke with Ron, and I'm sympathetic. He has someone that he doesn't know well, making direct contact with Hamas. Maybe I would see them and say, look, they don't have horns growing out of their head. They're actually guys like us. They're pretty nice guys. So he doesn't know me, and there are big stakes. He lives in a country where if it sets certain precedents, then it will hurt or help a lot of other people. So I understand the consternation and the concern, and I wasn't upset. At the same time, we're the United States. We're not an agent of Israel. We have specific interests at play, and we did communicate back and forth. We had very specific parameters by which we fell, and the reality is what I wanted to do is jumpstart some negotiations that were in a very fragile place. And I wanted to say to Hamas, what is the end game that you want here? Not the dream end game, but what do you think is realistic at this point? Because until we know that, it's very hard to reach some sort of truce or some sort of end to hostility. So in the end, I think it was a very helpful meeting. It was very helpful to hear some back and forth. But I think Israel knows walking out of that, you know, it's not like Hamas got the world because I thought they were a bunch of nice guys.
Right. How quickly could something come together in terms of this negotiation?
I think something could come together within weeks. I will say that I believe there is enough there to make a deal between what Hamas wants and what they've accepted, and what Israel wants and it's accepted. And I think I think there is a deal where they can get all of the prisoners out, not just the Americans.
Before you go, I do want to ask you about journalist Austin Tice, who's been held in Syria for the last 12 years. Do you